countdown
3,
after we've hit record.
2, 1. Reborn!
Hi,
Hi,
Sophie.
Sophie. Hi, Sin. Hi, everyone. And welcome to another exciting episode of Soul's Mixtape, Episode 5.
For reference, I am on the verge of falling asleep and Sin just woke up.
Woo! Big hype.
This is a series that we do where we answer questions that are put to us by our viewers. You can either leave comments on this video, or you can go over to Patreon, or you can leave them on our Discord. So there's some we haven't done yet, but like I said, I am about to fall asleep and Sin is still waking up, so we're not really equipped to answer anything complicated right now. It's been a very busy month for us. We're not really capable of tackling anything terribly complicated today, but we will. We both have holidays coming up, so we'll do it then.
We'll do our best. All right, Sophie, thank you. Question number 1 is from Simone. Has the Erdtree actually burned before? What happened? Yes, the Erdtree burned before because every Souls game is a cycle.
Thank you, Sin. Question 2. Okay, so the Erdtree burning before, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll start by saying, it definitely has burned before. That's, I think, inarguable. The question is what exactly happened and why it happened and who did it. And that whole aspect of Elden Ring, it's one of those things that, it's sort of in there in a way that makes me think this was probably either intended to be expanded upon into a more complicated story, or maybe it was a more complicated story, and then they cut it down to something simpler during development. It's one of those kind of situations. So
did Vike do it?
Kind of.
Because we have a whole episode on Vike, so you see, I remember, I pay attention.
Yeah, he was there.
He was there. I thought he did it for his maiden.
Bernal.
Oh, that guy! Yeah, we have an episode on him too.
The question of whether the Erdtree has burned before is, like I was saying, I think it's pretty inarguable it has, because if you go to where the base of the Erdtree is, there is just ash everywhere. We're talking about the lower part of Lanedale, where Round Table Hold is. That whole place is buried in ash. So, yeah, it has been burned before, but you'll notice it's still there. So what's kind of happened here, seemingly, is that it was set on fire, but it didn't burn down. And as you'll know from actually playing through Elden Ring, as Sin has many, many times, it's her favorite game, that you also kind of need to burn the Erdtree in 2 stages. You set it on fire with the flame from the Giant's Forge, but that doesn't quite do the job. The thorns stay there. In order to properly get through the thorns, you've actually got to go to Farum Azula and unbind Destined Death, and then kind of really properly burn it a second time to get through the thorns into the center of the Erdtree. So the burning of the Erdtree is very explicitly, there's 2 steps to it. So whoever burned the Erdtree the first time, it's they did step 1, but they didn't do step 2. So presumably, it smoldered for a while. It was on fire, ash was falling down, and then that just stopped, having not actually accomplished anything. So the question of who did it is also, I think it's pretty directly answered by the game, which is that it's Bernal. There's this group of I think they may be called the Old Tarnished at one point, but it's the standard sort of Miyazaki story. So there's this group of characters who I think they are explicitly called the Old Tarnished at one point. It's the standard Miyazaki style story beat where in the past there was a group of people who did the same thing that you're doing now, but they kind of screwed up, they didn't do it properly, and now some of them have gone rogue, and some of them are trying to help you, and some of them have kind of given into despair. So in Elden Ring, there's this group of Old Tarnish, which includes Vike, Lionel, Bernal, Wilhelm, Vagram, all these people who you sort of hear about. So when you line up these character stories, it's okay, these guys all kind of hung out together. They were allies slash friends. They went on a quest that's very similar to our quest. And along the way, like various things happen. Like Vike goes down and becomes frenzied. Vagrom decides to worship the Glowmine Queen, etc., etc. But the important one is Bernal, because it says that Bernal's maiden explicitly she throws herself in the fire, and that's what makes Bernal snap and turn against the Erdtree. What appears to have happened is that Bernal and the rest of the Tarnish, like Vike, etc., they make it to the mountaintops, and then they're going to burn the Erdtree because, like, why else would you go there? They use Bernal's maiden as kindling in the same way that you use Melina as kindling. And then the same thing happens where the Erdtree catches fire and it burns for a bit, but it doesn't actually burn down. The difference is that when we do it, completely inexplicably, after Melina burns up, we just teleport directly to Farum Azula. That's where we can undo the Rune of Death and burn the thorns properly. So what appears to have happened is they did the first part of that where the maiden burned up, but they didn't inexplicably get transported to Farum Azula, so the Rune of Death was never unbound. So the tree just smoldered for a bit and then stayed upright, and they couldn't get inside of it. So it's that. It's like they did our story up until Farum Azula, but they never went to Farum Azula. So there's the quest sort of like stalled and failed, and that resulted in Bernal's maiden being sacrificed for nothing. So that's kind of what makes Bernal snap. That like they went through all that, and then his maiden's burned up, and there was no point in any of it. And the reason I say like this feels like it was part of something else originally is that like Farum Azula is just really strange. Like it feels almost like arbitrary and tacked onto the end. In the sense that you just randomly teleport there, but like I've spoken to a lot of people who do the data mining and everything else, and they're fairly confident that like there was another way into Farum Azula initially. Like you had to actually do something to kind of unlock it instead of it being the automatic endgame area. And that may have had something to do with the Divine Towers, just because if you position Farum Azula in the center of the map, it would line up with the Divine Tower. So it sort of makes sense they'd be connected somehow, but we're not 100% sure. So I get the impression that like it was probably going to be kind of good ending, bad ending situation where like you could maybe end the game having just burned the Erdtree and just leave it there, or you could continue on with Farum Azula and get this like quote unquote true ending. I guess kind of like in Bloodborne where like you can choose to submit to Gurman and then you miss like the sort of the very end of the game.
Thank you, Sophie. My contribution to this question is that I recently saw a scary movie called Subservience with Megan Fox. It was predictable but pretty good. I think Megan Fox should play more creepy ladies because she's really good at it.
Thank you. Well, since speaking of terrifying, Rich B has a question from 1 month ago.
Rich B? From the B movie! Rich B! Yes, please go on.
What's the deal with the guy in Bloodborne who asks for the password to the Forbidden Woods? How is he talking to you if he's already been dead for years? Also,
Okay.
why did Willem assign a single guy to sit behind the door until he died instead of having some students work shifts?
The reason why by the time we arrive the guy's dead is because when we arrive, we're like, hey, let me in. He's like, password. And we're like, we'll be right back. And because Bloodborne is so addictive, you spend about 50 years just farming the first 2 brick trolls to get to level 100.
That's one approach.
So by the time you come back, the dude is dead.
So it's
Just a lot of time has passed.
okay.
Another approach could be that this is like a horror game. And it's like, whoa, it's mysterious. What do you think?
Who can say? Okay. So the reason this jumped out to me is I was actually talking to Abyss One slash Eugenio a couple of days ago, and for reference, he's a guy who's involved in making a very very comprehensive Bloodborne overhaul mod. And like part of that has been him kind of cracking open the map files and the character files and just finding stuff as he's working on modifying them. Hopefully that mod will actually be out for the 10th anniversary next year, so March 2025 ish. And yeah, he actually found the Gatekeeper.
Yeah?
Yeah, so that model, it started off as a dead coach driver, and they've kind of moved it back to where the Gatekeeper is.
Oh.
So there's also a lot of cut Gatekeeper dialogue where he's a lot more talkative.
I don't know how a hunter learned the password, but let me say this much. Down the embankment, beyond the forest, there it stands. Old Bergenworth. But it's not what you think. They don't welcome newcomers.
Interestingly, they did multiple takes of how long he's been there.
Ah, my first visitor in a year. Ah, my first visitor in a decade. Ah, my first visitor in 2 decades. Ah, my first visitor in, half a century. Ah, my first visitor in, a full century.
Mhm.
Obviously, 100 years is a very long time to be guarding a door. Little bits and pieces of his dialogue are in the game, but they're not subtitled. But if you listen to him, he's sort of muttering like he's it reminds me a bit actually of Crestfallen Merchant in Dark Souls, where he realizes he's hollowing and he starts counting to sort of keep himself focused. So if you listen to the Gatekeeper, he'll be repeating like, if someone's at the door, got to get the door, got to get the door, got to make sure no one goes to the door, make sure the door's like that. He's just muttering to himself. And at one point, because annoyingly it's not subtitled and there's no script, so I don't know if this was written for him or he improvised it or the director improvised it. But at one point he seems to say like, "Oh, he bit me and it's bleeding," which implies that
Mhm.
like people from Cathedral Ward maybe did try to come through and they were infected with beasthood and they were like attacking him at some point. So basically, like, despite all of that, like my take on the Gatekeeper is like, I sort of viewed it as like he's keeping the door shut with like his last breath. So he's like, his only goal in life is to hold this door closed, and then the second someone comes through it, it's like the last of his life force kind of leaves his body and he just like collapses dead. That obviously doesn't work with the fact he looks like a fucking skeleton. But maybe he was like totally emaciated by that point, because like we've talked about this a little bit before, but the timeline of like Lawrence leaves Bergenworth to the present looks like it's about 20 years ish.
Mhm.
And like further evidence it's been 20 years is that, like I mentioned, there's all these different takes of that line. 20 years is the only one with a subtitle. So it feels like they did the takes and they settled on 20 and then cut 20. But I think like even aside from that, 20 years is sort of about right in terms of how the story mechanics work. So, yeah, I get the impression he was just holding the door shut with like his last breath, and then the second it was open, he just like expired on the spot. That's kind of how I view it. Obviously, like ghosts can exist in this world. There's nothing
Yeah, yeah.
stopping him being a ghost, being undead. I think the
Yes.
fact that yeah, I think, but like I think the fact that he's just a corpse from that point onward, like he's just gone. There's not
Uh-huh.
like a zombified gatekeeper wandering around or something like that. I think it's just implied like, he was just holding it and he just died the second it was open. So
Okay.
okay, and the next
Very
question,
cool.
this is
Yes.
there's a second part to this question, which is, why did Willem assign a single guy to sit behind the door until he died instead of just having some students work shifts?
Because students work shifts implies payment. Now, for anybody
Yeah.
who's worked in academia, in
Oh
certain
boy. Yeah.
In certain academic spaces, they will literally do anything but pay you, and then I'm doing air quotes, pay you in experience. We can
Yeah.
put,
Yeah.
that paper you're working on,
Mm,
we won't pay you, but we can put your name on it. Which
yeah.
is like, wait, I'm already working on it. Shouldn't my name already be on it? And you should pay me because I'm doing this work because your name will be on it too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because you're young, you don't think that way. You're like, oh, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the recommendation letter that you will provide for me. Oh, I will work for you forever for the next 100 years for free.
That's
That's
how he
why.
roped in Gurman. It's like, oh, I'll pay you in exposure.
I'll pay you an exposure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not all places, but
No, it's all places.
oh, it's all places. On a side note, so we do these mixtapes as well as a lot of other things, and a lot of unedited things go to patreon.com/sinclairlore. And I just checked there, and Patreon has finally did something that we were hoping they would do for years, is create little like playlists. Because what
All
we did
right.
is we had our makeshift thing that's not very practical to keep track of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, for patrons, next time you log in, you can go to a little tab called Collection, and you'll have some of the playlists there. Because we have about 500 videos on Patreon, it's going to take a little while to organize everything, but we'll make it. We're getting there. Yay.
Yeah.
Okay, Sophie, what's the next question?
The next question is from, I think this is pronounced Benray. This is French.
Benre. It's actually Italian.
I would love to hear your thoughts on the two church servants in front of the Grand Cathedral that can cause frenzy with their wooden crosses. There are only two enemies of this type in the whole game, and I was always wondering what the deal with them was.
We did an episode on this. I don't
Did
remember
we?
when. Yeah, it's been years. It might have been unlisted, it might have been deleted. Maybe it was never released because it turned into a rant. But we did.
We definitely did. We definitely did an episode on the church servants because we did every single enemy of Bloodborne at one point.
I remember talking about this specific topic because they're crosses, they frenzy you, right? So it's
Yeah.
weird. I can't remember. Why do they frenzy us?
Well, okay, think about like other sources of frenzy in the game, right?
Okay, Brain of Menses. Oh, they put
Yeah.
some Brain of Menses goo on their crosses?
How did they get the goo from the brain of Menses?
Okay, remember how Mikolash and Lawrence were at one point working together?
No, but are they going to the top and getting the goo off it, or is there just like a bucket under it and they're collecting it as it falls down?
Can you prove it didn't happen?
You know, I can't. And that means it might have.
Welcome to the lore.
I can't prove it didn't happen. Therefore, it's law.
My boyfriend was watching something the other day, like a lore video popped out on his
Oh,
screen,
why?
and it
I
had
mean,
like,
continue.
yeah, because it had like, as per usual, a lot of views, and he's like, oh, let me check it out. And he had to like, after like a minute, he noped out. He's like, this is so stupid. I can't anymore. He just like noped out and left the room.
Yeah, imagine how I feel.
Please continue.
Okay. So, the thing about Frenzy, right,
Yeah.
is it has this reputation for being like a sort of Call of Cthulhu insanity effect thing, right? Because it's associated with things like the Mensis Brain, like the Winter Lanterns, like the Gardens of Eyes in Bergenworth, that don't appear to be necessarily like physically doing things to you. It's almost like the perception of them is screwing with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about that is like in all those cases, the frenzy is a specific attack that they're doing to you. It's not like just the perception of this thing's doing it. It's like it's actually like hitting you with a defined thing that's got frenzy in it. So like the Mensis Brain, when it's frenzying you, you'll know because it starts to glow and it's actually like attacking you and it's making your blood come out in these weird spikes, right? So what's frenzying you isn't the brain existing, it's that the brain is doing some weird like blood magic to you that is causing your blood to spurt out of you, and that's frenzying you. Winter lanterns are similar. Like, it's not that the winter lantern looks at you and you frenzy, although that's in practice basically how it works. What happens is the winter lantern, it's technically a projectile attack. You just can't see the projectile. So it gives the impression that it's like a line of sight, but no, it's actually like shooting something at you. And if you ever wanted to know why winter lanterns feel like such bullshit, it's because that frenzy attack wasn't part of the original enemy design. They add it later on. And the way that they add it is that they add an invisible like gun turret to the winter lantern's head that points at you and shoots little frenzy bullets at you. I think the other frenzy source that is a little confusing initially is the Gardens of Eyes, because they hold this rock up to you and you hear this like noise, and that frenzies you. And I think people, including me, like for ages, were assuming, oh, it's because like the sound of the rock is like driving you insane. But the Garden of Eyes is also biting you at the same time. So it seems more like it's the biting that is actually causing the frenzy thing to happen. And my assumption with the church servants and those crucifix things is like, if you look at those crucifix things, they're covered in bloodstains, and they have on them like the remnants of things that you would tie someone to one of those stakes with. It's like they were presumably used as actual crucifixes. So I think honestly what's happened is like that's just been used to presumably execute people, I guess, or torture them or something. And over time, like all of the blood has soaked into the wood of this thing, so that when they jab you with it, it's like all that congealed, kind of like tainted, frenzied blood's getting into you, and it's like triggering the frenzy thing. So it's because you're being stabbed with something that's covered in weird tainted blood.
Tainted blood. Oh. Tainted
blood. Run away. That's also how it works in game, because you see them and you want to run away. You have to get away from the thing you drive into the heart of me, which is the spike.
Oh my god! Lore! You have figured it out!
Why is no one talking about this? I'm dislocating my jaw doing YouTube thumbnail face.
Good job, Sophie. That was an excellent answer.
Now remember, Sin, this is our series, You Choose Law. So it's up to the people in the comments to vote as to whose answer was the correct one.
Oh my god.
That's a deep cut for a video that doesn't exist anymore.
Oh god. Okay, it's gonna be
posted by someone we've both blocked.
Oh, that's a whole... I think we would talk about it in one of the never to be released Christmas videos.
Well, you got a new one coming up. I look forward to recording with you over Christmas and not releasing it because we start crying.
Oh my god, it's therapeutic. It's our yearly therapy session. Oh. I think
you'd like to see me have a nervous breakdown dressed as an elf.
It's a sexy elf.
It wasn't a sexy elf. It was just a regular elf, and I can't help being hot.
Now, Sophie.
Yes,
next
Sam.
question is for Ryan Brett. Any thoughts on Nanaya being Shabriri all along? Well, Ryan, Nanaya business! I'll be honest, I didn't play Elden Ring that much. I watched a lot of lore. I don't know, Nanaya Shabriri. Shabriri is the mean guy with the hat, I think, right?
Yeah, sure.
I have no idea who Nanaya is. Yeah, sure, Nanaya Shabriri. I'm good with that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is something that, like, I brought up when I talked to Trina about the DLC, right? Which is that it feels weird and off to me that in the base game, they make a big point about there's this guy called Shabriri, and he was imprisoned for the crime of slander, and he had his eyes gouged out. And When his eyes were gouged out, the flame of frenzy filled the sockets, and that's described as like this was the beginning of the frenzy. And he's described as like he was the most reviled man in history. And you meet him, like you said, he's a mean guy with a hat. But what's actually happened is another mean guy with a hat has had his body possessed by Shabriri. So when you meet him, it's like Shabriri's ghost is possessing Yura's body.
Okay.
He's saying, "Oh yes, you are acquainted with this vessel, but it is I, Shabriri." And then, like, if you kill Shabriri in Yura's body, he actually says, like, well, I can't die. Like, I have no body. You kill this one, I'll just come back as someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the DLC shows up, and they commit to a frenzy area that is absolutely massive. And that culminates in, like, a fight with someone who is becoming Lord of the Frenzied Flame called Midra. And you find out that Midra got his like frenzy stuff from this lady called Nanaya. And there's still someone missing from this story who is Shabriri. So it's like a little weird that you spend the base game hyping up Shabriri as like the number one frenzy guy who's like immortal and can hop from body to body. And like frenzy starts with him and he's the most reviled man in history. And then go, and also here's like the dedicated frenzy area. It's frenzy all the time. We've got so much frenzy here. Woo, frenzy, frenzy, frenzy. And Shabriri literally is never mentioned.
Yeah.
So it leads to this theory that, like, okay, did Shabriri hop into Nanaya? Right.
Did he?
So at the heart of this is, like, something that you and I make fun of a fair bit when we're doing our, like, serious lore, why is no one talking about this routine? And it's the difference between saying, like, Nanaya is Shabriri because, like, this thing and this thing and this thing point to it being Shabriri, and saying Nanaya isn't not Shabriri because there's nothing that rules out her being Shabriri, right? They're two completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
So Nanaya's, like, definitely the second case. Like I was saying, there's literally zero reference to Shabriri at all in any of that. And if you look at, like, when we encounter Shabriri in Yura's body, like, Shabriri's not pretending to be Yura. He doesn't even seem to really know who Yura is. He's just like, oh yes, you were acquainted with the previous consciousness inhabiting this vessel, but I'm Shabriri. So when Shabriri is like hopping from body to body, he's doing that because that's how he affects the world, because he's otherwise an incorporeal being. It's kind of like Rani and the doll. Like, he's just, if he wants to actually do something, he has to hop into like a physical body to make it happen. But he's not doing it to pretend to be someone else. Like, he's not pretending to be Yura.
Okay.
The whole Shabriri is Nanaya thing, it relies on like Shabriri engaging in this like active sort of piece of deception where he pretends to be this person called Nanaya, and he like comes up with the story about where he came from, and he like whispers things in the ear of Midra to convince him to like become Lord of the Frenzied Flame and stuff. But like, based on his actual MO, like, we meet Shabriri. Like, this is not conjecture. Like, you meet him, you see how he acts. He doesn't do that. He's just hopping from body to body because it's how he affects the world. If he was in Nanaya's body, he would just go, hey, I'm Shabriri. This is the vessel I currently inhabit. And then he'd like shoot fire from his eyes at someone. So like I'm saying, like, I don't think Nanaya's Shabriri because there's nothing that actually positively points to her being Shabriri. Everything just points to her being this like frenzied lady called Nanaya. And when people say that she might be Shabriri, it just means that like there's no item text or something that ends with like, by the way, she is definitely not Shabriri. Because the whole thing about a character being like a bodiless consciousness is like, technically you could say that about anyone. You could say any character in this game could be Shabriri if that's the logic that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
But like I was saying before, I think the reason people want her to be Shabriri is that like it would actually make more thematic sense than the story we got. It would tie the two things together, it'd give us more Shabriri stuff. But as it is, like, we're just sort of in a situation where the Shabriri plot is kind of abandoned and replaced with something else. So I don't think she's Shabriri all along, but like I understand why people want her to be.
Thank you, Sophie. Okay, the next question is from Rorik, a resident artist. Did every bonfire used to have a firekeeper, or just the ones where firekeeper souls are found? That's an interesting question, actually. I feel like every bonfire used to have a firekeeper because it was like the cool new hip thing to do
Right.
when they were prospering. And then when
Yeah.
we arrive, everything is poop. So maybe some firekeepers left, some got murdered, some got demoted.
What do you get demoted to if you're a firekeeper?
Butcher. The butcher ladies we find in the Soulsborne series.
Okay, so I'm developing in my head as we speak an exciting new lore theory that you can't prove isn't true, and will in fact allow us to rediscover the world of Dark Souls for the 80th time. And that's that Maneater Mildred is actually the original Firekeeper of Blighttown, and
Yes!
she was demoted, and
Yes!
that's why she's in the swamp, because they threw her off, and she's wearing the sack on her head so people don't recognize that she's the Firekeeper.
Yes!
And she left that Firekeeper soul in the cell that clearly has a Firekeeper in it to throw them off the scent. So they think that she's dead. She faked her own death.
Okay, but girl, very important bonfires would have more than one firekeeper. So she didn't need to fake her own death. This was the other firekeeper's soul.
It's the Glow-Eyed Queen. It's Velka. It's Radahn. It's conveniently every character who does well in SEO.
The wet nurse! The wet nurse!
I mean, you never see the wet nurse's face. You can't prove she's not the Glow-Eyed Queen, who's also Velka.
You can't prove she's not Mildred!
I know, it's great. You'd think that, like, openly admitting that you don't understand even the basic narrative structure of a story would preclude you from positioning yourself as some sort of critical or interpretive authority on it, but apparently no.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sam. We still haven't answered the question at all.
Oh, what's the question?
The question was about bonfires.
Yeah, I thought we did, but go on.
So, like we were saying when we uncovered True Hidden Lore,
Yeah.
there are some bonfires that, like, clearly at some point had a Firekeeper and the Firekeeper is gone.
Mhm.
So the one we were talking about was in Blighttown. Like, there is a cell, and in the cell is this, like, Firekeeper soul. It's like, oh, okay, there was a Firekeeper here. She presumably died. So, like, presumably there was, like, a bonfire at that point in Blighttown, and it's gone now. So the other one that, like, sort of springs to mind is Undead Parish, where there is, like, a Firekeeper soul on the altar. And you can see, like, directly opposite the altar, there's one of Seath's channelers, and Seath's channelers' thing is they go around kidnapping maidens for Seath to experiment on. So, presumably, like, there was a Firekeeper at the altar. And again, like, the similar thing, it ends up happening to Rhea of Thorolund. Like, if she goes to the altar, and depending on your actions, she can get kidnapped by Seath's channelers as well. The death of a Firekeeper does put the bonfire out, which you'd know, like, if you kill Quellag's sister or the Dark Moon Knightess or something like that, it stops you being able to use the bonfire. So, like, the Firekeepers that are dead around the place, like, their fire's presumably gone out. But then, like, the other fires around there, they just seem to burn independently. They don't seem to have Firekeepers. There's a lot of bonfires in Dark Souls that, like, clearly no one is really tending to. And it's like, if that had a Firekeeper associated with it and you got rid of the Firekeeper, then the fire would go out, logically, because that's how the other ones seem to work. But yeah, the thing about them is, like, the ones that have Firekeepers, when you meet them, they're kindled further. Like, they give you 10 Estus instead of 5. But you can also kindle all of them up to 20. So it just sort of makes me think that, like, So you can still supercharge like the regular bonfires, like the Firekeeper ones are innately better. And maybe we're the Firekeeper of the other ones since we're the one kindling it.
Huh.
Maybe that's us.
There we go.
Velka.
Final question by Bigley. What is this? Can you read it?
Fingley.
Fingley.
Do you think whoever has been trying to make a half-dragon deuteragonist happen for multiple games now still has the resolve to keep going, provided they even work at FromSoft anymore? So, Sin, do you know what this is referring to?
Honestly, no.
So, Dark Souls 1, right? It's one of those things that's like, it's not something you would get out of just playing the game, but if you're in like the fandom, you'll be aware of it. Is that Priscilla?
Mm-hmm.
She was initially conceptualized as having a role like the Maiden in Black. Like she'd be the one that leveled you up.
Okay.
And her internal name, I'm fairly certain it's Heroine, which is what they always call like the female sort of like main lead in these games. It's like the doll is Heroine, Maiden in Black's Heroine, and Priscilla is also Heroine.
Okay.
But of course, they cut her and they put her in the Painted World. By which I mean Miyazaki always intended her to be in the Painted World. And this is all part of his 5-dimensional chess. So she was like cut from that role. She became a boss. Then kind of the same thing happened with Yoshka. This is a little less well known than the Priscilla thing. Yoshka has. It's not like animations and stuff that I'm aware of, but there's like assets that would spawn Yoshka in other maps that she's not currently on. So like you could have her spawn along Road of Sacrifice. You could have her in. She's actually in quite a lot of locations in Cathedral of the Deep. Like she'd sort of move around. And like that combined with like the fact that in game now she doesn't really do anything, all kind of points toward Yoshka was like, if not necessarily like a Firekeeper figure, she was someone who was going to be very pivotal to the quest and like appear at multiple locations along the journey. I guess similar to like Emerald Herald in Dark Souls 2, where she just starts showing up like in like just maps toward the end of the game. You'll just turn around, Emerald Herald's there, and she's like, "Sup." So what the question's asking is like that's two strikes in a row. So it's like, do you think whoever's doing that is still trying to make it happen, or do you think they've given up now?
Are there any dragon wives in Elden Ring?
Yeah, but they're literal dragons that like turn into people.
Yeah, they've given up. They gave up the second they turned the dragon into a literal person.
I mean, there's the dragon priestess in the DLC, but she's a pretty minor character. So there's two instances of us essentially getting that, but without any like actual dragon physiology.
Okay.
So the first one's Emerald Herald. They mention that like Emerald Herald is born of dragons, and she's got this like very close relationship with the dragons. There's something about dragons that allowed them to create Emerald Herald, so she's kind of a dragon. She doesn't look like one, doesn't really act like one, but like I don't know, if you did like a DNA test, there'd be some dragon in there. And the other one is Kuro from Sekiro, who did make it into the final game. And like again, he's not physically like a weird dragon boy, but he's got like that connection to the divine dragon, that connection to like the dragon's heritage that has made him immortal.
Okay.
We don't know anything about Miyazaki's next fantasy game, but he did cite Aura Battler Dunbine as an influence, and that's got beetles in it.
Aww.
So maybe we'll have a half beetle lady.
That's very cute.
Do you want to watch Aura Battler Dunbine?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Well, Sin, that was only 45 minutes longer than I'd planned.
Oh, fudge. Sophie, the trick is don't edit. All right, Sophie. Do the outro.
It's 1:30 in the morning.
And thank you everyone for listening. And see y'all next time.
Ciao, Sue.
Ciao, so. Oh, yeah. So it's not underground. It's on top. No, we actually.
Mhm.
Okay, Sophie. Okay, how do we get the brain of Menses underground?
A lever.
Yeah, so they pull
Yeah.
a lever, the Menses goes underground, and then they kind of just poke it a little, just like
Mhm.
get the sludge, and then the brain's like, "Thanks, guys, for like scratching my back because I can never reach it," and they're like,
It's
"It's
got.
okay,
Hey,
it
you
helps us
couldn't reach it.
too."
It's got giant, long, gangly arms. It can reach anything.
Just no, but so, you know how some points on your body you can't reach, like you
Yeah,
can't reach,
yeah.
like so you have to get
Yeah, but
like
if
a
I had
thing.
two
And
massive tentacle arms with no elbows and like full movement, I reckon I could reach anywhere.
which no, because it's not like super flexible. Just because it's tentacles, it doesn't mean they're super duper flexible. Brain tentacles don't work like that, Sophie.
So you think it's like it's not it's just been skipping tentacle day. Its tentacles are very liquid.
Yes.
What
I mean, it's an
what you're
academic. So.
describing with them poking it, that's how they get like the mucus out of snails that they make like night cream out of.
You want to know something freaky?
They just like stress the snails out so they start excreting this mucus.
Okay, so guess what I have on my face right now that my sister gave me?
Is it snail cream?
She gave me some snail cream, and I thought that was just like a funny name. I'm gonna
No,
have
it's
to
made of
check
snail.
if there's there's snail
What's not-
mucus on my face.
It's not made of snail, it's the mucus from the snails.
There's mucus. Ew. My face.
I mean, there's places that'll do it with like actual snails. They just put them on your face and they just like squirm around everywhere. And that
Yeah,
feels kinder to the snails. I don't want to. I don't want my
Oh
night
my
cream
God.
like powered by mollusk anxiety.
Yeah, is this why I'm already anxious. I don't need more of it.
Think
I'll
about
need
the
to go read
snails.
the
They stress
ingredients.
them out to get that.
Holy shit, that's crazy because she gave me the snail cream and a snail
Yeah.
night mask. So I've been
Okay.
double snailing my face.
Why did you think it was called snail cream if it didn't have anything to do with snails?
It's like it's cute. Like, ooh, snail. Like I have a makeup kit. I have a thing called
Yeah.
I don't know even what it says. Give with an X? Like
Yeah.
it's not made of my ex. You know, it's not literal, Sophie. I have a thing that says fortifying and lengthening mascara. It's not literally gonna fortify nothing. Oh, this one, look, that's my jam. It's not literally jam, Sophie. It's a palette.
Yeah. This
Okay?
can of Red Bull's not literally got bull in it.
Exactly. Why did it call it a
Yeah.
Red Bull if it's chocolate? Yeah, that's what it like. Snail cream, Red Bull.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god.